Alright, so today Amanda has the question, how do you go about thinking up an ending? I feel like I never know where these people are going. I feel like I understand some piece of their conflict, but I don't quite know where they're going to end up. How do I search out that ending so I can have it in mind as I begin? For me, beginnings are always what come first. Part of any story that I write, I always have the beginning in my head before I begin it. Um, it's usually the first part of the story that just comes to me when I'm thinking about it. So this might be a little difficult for me to explain because it's something that apparently just comes to me. But things to keep in mind, because I do have a few endings that I have changed um, while I write. Things to keep in mind is, what's the main conflict of your story? And how can it be resolved? How will it be resolved, and how won't it be resolved at the end? For instance, in the Disney movie Frozen, when Anna realizes does the act of true love for Elsa, and that's how the conflict is resolved, and that's the answer to Elsa's powers and how she controls them is love. That's sprinkled throughout the movie with Anna on this massive kind of hunt for love, even with Hans, but even just how she's so desperate for love because she just adores her sister, so she wants to find some sort of love somewhere else. It's even in the Troll song when they talk about how love is powerful, a force powerful and strange, and that is woven into the story and is the main resolution for the plot. And that is how Elsa controls her powers, and that's how things get resolved. So I think if you think about Frozen, the whole story works toward that. It's a story about love, like a lot of different forms of love. Um, and so when you think about your ending, what are, and to keep going back to themes, but like, what are the themes of your story? What do you want to accomplish by telling your story? What are the ways you want to work toward that ending? What do you want the ending to be? A lot of the time, my endings come with who survives and who doesn't, and how I want, because I not necessarily don't have the main details worked out, but I'll have because I usually write series and not standalone novels. I'll have the general ending of a particular of the first book in mind before I start it, so that I know where it's going to end and then where the next one will begin from that point. Whether it's right after or after some time has passed time has passed after the ending of the first book. But whether you're writing a series or just a standalone book, I think the ending is something definitely to keep in mind, because you hit what you aim for. If you don't have a goal to work toward, then you might kind of aimlessly wander around and not have a story that propels your readers or your characters onward. So I think ways to start thinking about endings would be, again, like, what's the main conflict of your book? And if it's a series, what's the conflict that is in the first book, and then what's the overall conflict? So you kind of have conflictception. You have your main conflict, and then you have the other conflicts that are going on that are propelling your main characters and your side characters forward in the story, and it's working up toward the main conflict in the end. You have a lot of side conflicts in Lord of the Rings. I'm trying not to use my own stories anymore so that I don't give away too much, because I've been doing that. I need to stop. In Lord of the Rings, you have three separate. We'll use the movies because the books are so detailed. You have three separate movies and separate kind of subplots, but the main overarching plot is that Frodo, the Fellowship, is working to destroy the ring, and Sauron is working tirelessly to find them and take the ring back and rule the world, essentially, and destroy the free races. So, but in the Fellowship of the Ring, you kind of had this side quest side quest of Boromir being possessed by the ring and that being a massive conflict within the Fellowship. And in the end, when he's killed, the conflict is resolved, but Merry and Pippin are taken. And then Frodo and Sam just split off and go their own way. And so that's more conflict where the characters have to decide what Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli have to decide. Do we go after Merry and Pippin, or do we go after Frodo and Sam? So that kind of carries over to the next book. And those are mini conflicts that lead up to them fighting to destroy Sauron and destroy the forces of darkness. But those are side plots. And conflict that's resolved and the conflict that's not resolved, and that carries over into the next movie. So I think stories are no different. How do you want them to end? You can have one ending in sight, and then all of a sudden your characters are like, no, this is where it ends, and the story just kind of ties in together, and that's it. But I think it's important to be cautious how you tie everything together, because sometimes I'll read novels and they'll have really quick, kind of hastily done endings, and it's incredibly unsatisfying to have an ending that, like, you're in the middle of a conflict and the book ends. And it's not because there's a second one, it just ends. That's the ending that the author had in mind. So at least that's how I feel. So in my opinion, that's not something you necessarily want to try to accomplish, but you want to create a good ending. For instance, in Catching Fire, when Katniss is lifted out of the arena, it doesn't just end with her lifted out of the arena. You kind of get a little more information when she wakes up as Haymitch and Finnick and, oh dear, I forgot the rebel leader's name. You get a little more resolution, and okay, this is the start of something, so that when we go into Mockingjay, we're not just like, oh my gosh, she got lifted up, what happened, what, wait, what? So we've gotten the sense that there's going to be a revolution, there's going to be this massive battle. So I think but again, in the Hunger Games, the first one, the entire thing is essentially revolves around Katniss, obviously, and her desire to survive for her family, and just to survive anyway, and her caring for Peeta is what leads to them almost eating the Nightlock berries. So that's how the conflict is resolved and how they win. So endings they're tricky little buggers. So I would start by trying to figure out, where do you want your story to lead? What do you want the resolution to be? Who do you want to live? Who do you want to die? Who do you want to be in love? Is there even love in the first place? Do you want it to be a focus? Do you want it to be the side conflict? Do you want everyone to be together when it's ended, or do you want there to be a splitting? If it's a series, is what interaction with the bad guy are you having, or is there a bad guy? What interaction are the main characters having? Are they fighting each other, or are they fighting the main bad guy? Endings are, again, they're tricky things. They come to me first. I usually will be thinking about a story and be like, okay, so this is what I want, and then I'll find the ending, and that's when I'll know it's a series, which usually it is, and that's where I want my characters to end up. So it helps me put into play the rest of the story, because I know what goal we're working toward. I know how to build I know what relationships I want built, so that impact of things like betrayal or romance or friendship or rivalry is as deep as I want it to go for the readers, so that they can feel what I want them to feel. So I think, for instance, when the more corrupted Frodo becomes in Lord of the Rings, when the ring continues to corrupt him, that's a massive thing. So when he finally turns on Sam, we as the movie watchers or book readers are like, oh my gosh, no, but your best friend, stop it. And that if Tolkien or Peter Jackson, or whoever was telling the story at the time, didn't have that in mind while they were weaving the friendship of Frodo and Sam, it would be harder to just suddenly whip that out when we're not as used to them as a team. That was very confusing, I'm sorry. But essentially, figure out where you want your characters to be, what goals you want them to achieve, what conflict you want to be resolved, and what conflict you want to carry over, or maybe have, because not all questions necessarily have to be answered. Not everything's going to be tied up in a neat little bow. It's good to have a main sense of completion, but life is messy and answers don't always come all neatly in the last chapter of whatever is going on, whatever conflict. So I would say just figure out what you want your story essentially to be about, and once you figure out what your story is about, you can help work toward the end. And that's a really messy answer, but because this is something that comes a little easier to me, it's harder for me to answer. So I'm going to end it now.